Hey, what's up, guys? This is Gavin Schall of the Locked On Knicks podcast, and today I am joined by Stacy, Patton of Strickland and the Believe Knicks podcast to talk about a 2-win weekend for the New York Knicks, a big comeback against the Miami Heat, and a nail-biter against the Detroit Pistons. The majority of our conversation in this first of two parts centers around Immanuel Quickley, his incredible performance against the Miami Heat, and how it's a microcosm of his massive jump as a player. All that and more right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, and I wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. We're now available on all platforms, including on YouTube. You know that if you're seeing my smiling face. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season, more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And as promised, I am joined by the fantastic. He used to star in this little documentary film called Eddie. I don't know if anyone saw in the 90s. He took a few years out of the game, but he's very much back in the basketball world. It is Stacy Patton. He is the co-host of Strickland on Mondays with the legendary Schwinny Poo. He also hosts the Believe Knicks podcast with the fantastic Matthew Miranda a couple times a week. Stacy, welcome back to the show. It's been a minute, man. Hope you're doing well. I assume you're doing well because your guy, Immanuel Quickley, has just been incredible of late. And that is exactly where I want to start by just letting you go whatever direction you want, just telling everyone how right you were, or just basking in the glory of the guy who just dropped 16 in the fourth quarter against the Miami Heat and has generally been masterful for the last 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've been pretty high on him. I will say that there's things he's doing right now that are surpassing not my highest expectations of him, but to some of the advanced point guard stuff. And I'm not going to do the I thought he wasn't a point guard thing again, but I've probably tweeted that a bunch of times because the Miami game was the peak of it. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I think even earlier this season, he went through a brutal shooting slump. And what was interesting to break it down was his pull-up shooting actually was about the same. I think last year he finished at 33%. This year it was 32%. He wasn't taking a ton more pull-ups, but his catch and shoot, I think last year was like 46%. And that cratered to I think at the lowest point, like really at the peak of the shooting slump was about 31%, which is not good, but it's also like a lot of that was just wide open threes. And people were talking about, is he struggling adapting to a new role without Derrick Rose? And I was like, the tracking data can be wonky from the NBA, but he's just missing a ton of wide open threes and he's getting them at the same rate as last year. And if you looked at everything else had improved, right? His assist rate has consistently been over 20 this year. He's at 22%. Last year, I think it was about 16 or 17%, particularly after he moved off ball more with Rose. He wasn't, but as a passer, he'd taken steps. I think his defense has been night and day. I think he was a very good defender in college. And even last year, you could see that he was better than some of the other Knicks guards at getting over screens. Like because of kind of his lean frame, that's an advantage he has. But his rotations, he was still adapting. It was normal rookie stuff. This year, he's been arguably one of the Knicks' best team defenders, certainly out of the perimeter guys. I think Grimes has a little bit better tools on ball, but he's also had a little bit of that adjustment. Even though Grimes is already better than Quickley was as a rookie.
Yeah.
But he improved as a defender. Can guard legitimately ones and twos. He's even offered sneaky good rim protection.
Yes.
I think a few people have posted about this, but actually given the volume of shots he's contested, he's able to use his length. He's getting a little bit handsy, the little early career Frank Ntilikina stuff. But that's a trade-off I'll make because he's also using that to create more turnovers. So he was doing everything else. What was frustrating was he was doing everything else better. He had improved, but people were calling it a sophomore slump or regression because the shooting was that bad. And then now that the shooting is clicked, it allows you to appreciate everything he's done. And that Miami game was really the peak because one, it wasn't against the Wizards or no disrespect to those teams, but this is a team that is on the Mount Rushmore of culture, or at least is known that way. Maybe I don't want to upset anyone who might hate Pat Riley, but the fact is they have built a consistent winner.
Yeah.
Something like the Spurs or the Patriots or whatever you want to call it. Spoelstra is probably, in my estimation, one of the top 2 coaches in the game right now. They were healthy. They had Bam Adebayo, who is a terrific defender who causes a ton of problems. Jimmy, obviously, we know about. Lowry, right? And he went against those guys and came back from 17 down, and it was the way he was doing it. It wasn't just a hot shooting night, although he hit a couple of big ones. I think he was 3 for 8, which is 37.5%. It's a good shooting night, but it's not like he was just hot from 3. He was consistently manipulating, again, not rookies. He was manipulating Jimmy Butler off ball with his ball fakes, with his eyes, creating lanes, directing traffic. The point guard things that everyone's like, he's not a real point guard. That's where he's really excelled. And I think he's been doing that more all season. And then he's also, of late, it seems like he gets to the rim at least once a game now, which may not sound like a lot, but it's still pretty impressive. It's still growth from last year when he was pretty much allergic. And now he's not as predictable with the floater. He could throw a lob. He can kick out. He's throwing more live dribble one-handed passes than he was last year when he would kind of gather. And he's also showed the ability to finish through contact and being creative off the glass. And, he doesn't take a lot of attempts at the rim, but he finishes at 60%, which, considering his size and he's not like John Moran or something, I'd take that if he finishes at 60% and slowly scales that volume up.
Yeah.
But I'll shout another article that was recently written on Basketball News. I don't know if you saw this, Gavin. It was Ethan. I forget his last name.
Yeah,
he's a good follower.
Yeah.
So Immanuel Quickley's unusual shot diet can work. I can add it on to the tweet later. I think I've promoted this article a few times. He's a Celtics writer mostly, but gave a really fair look. And a lot of it was kind of talking about his pathway. Like, he gets as close to the rim as possible without actually taking a lot of layups. And so he shoots a lot of the short mid-range, right? So it's not quite taking a floater from the free throw line. It's like, it's kind of in that 6 to 10 foot range. And there was an interesting group of players that were up there, right? I think Conley is on the list. If you look at the guys who are taking the most of those shots or the highest percentage, the list is Chris Paul, Marcus Morris, Quickley, Conley, Durant, Tyus Jones, Middleton, Booker. And Jones and Conley are interesting comps because they are able to shoot enough at the short mid-range where and well enough. Jones at 48%, Conley is at 43% this year, where it's enough to keep defenses honest, and that opens up the playmaking, and that opens up maybe some easier opportunities at the rim. And Quickly's 57% at the rim, which is actually better than Conley is now. Obviously, Conley's older.
Yeah.
But the point is, there is a pathway to him being a pretty high-level scorer, and there's a much better in-depth look. He talks about how the playmaking gets opened up, how IQ can still make that equation work in terms of efficiency if he's hitting his open threes. And and then if you add in like the point guard skills he's shown, I think that it's very important growth, and it shows his work ethic is very much unmatched on this team, except for maybe another guy named RJ Barrett, who we can talk about later. But the last thing I'll say is you never want to. I think even Poku has been playing better, for example, right? There's been a lot of young guys late in seasons for not great teams who kind of, you'll see this. I've seen this in the past. We saw it with some of the other Knicks guys too. So you don't want to lean too much into it. But given what he's shown, I think if you can get a guy like Jalen Brunson, he adds a dimension to the Knicks beyond quote unquote being a point guard in his ability to get to the rim and finish at a high level, right? You add Colin Sexton or someone like that because he's a good player. But I don't think when you talk about the Knicks need a point guard and also judging the results from this season, I'm not so quick to say that, because in addition to Quickly, they have McBride, they have Rokas Jokubaitis overseas. Like, I don't think they need to accept a terrible contract just for the sake of getting a point guard. I think if you can add talent in the form of Brunson or Sexton, and the beauty of Quickly is that he can play on or off ball too. So can Deuce. They're both big guys who are defensively versatile and move well without the ball and can shoot. But I think he provides them some flexibility at that position that they frankly have never really had. So anyway, I just talked for a long time, but yeah.
No, but you nailed and you nailed it, and you hit on a ton of good stuff. Just zooming out, big picture. This is from Fred Katz, who tweeted this out today. Immanuel Quickley since February 16th, over the course of 16 games, 15 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. That's in 25 minutes per game, shooting 48% from the field, 43% from three, 90% from the foul line. That's 66% true shooting. I mean, that is about as high level backup point guard play as you will ever find in the NBA. And to your point, I'll emphasize the point guard aspects of that, because you can just look at that stat line and say like, all right, but what is he? I mean, yeah, sure, the 4 assists a night over a starting role that would translate, I don't know, to 6 or 7 assists. But to me, like, again, that's where like watching the games really comes into play, and you just see the advancement. And this was something Zach Lowe pointed out in his column this week, but just the eye manipulation. Like, I know a bunch of people were clipping this play, but it was very early. I want to say it was in the Pistons game where he was. I'm trying to find. Yeah, no, sorry, it was against the Heat. He just comes into the game, immediately draws 2 guys. Eye fakes over to Fournier, pass fakes to Fournier. The entire defense shifts that direction, rapidly whips around, almost like a shortstop, and just redirects it to RJ Barrett for a wide open 3. And I think we started seeing that from him in Summer League a little bit, but it's really coming to fruition as the shooting has come on, because that's just given him this extra layer of leverage. And then he had another play against the Heat where I'm trying to remember exactly where it was in the game. I think I tweeted it out. I'm pretty sure it was like late first quarter. So he basically just toasts Kyle Lowry with a behind the back move, and he has a chance to just jack the 3. And I think rookie Immanuel Quickley just fires up that 3 without a second thought. But instead he hesitates for a sec. He freezes Dwayne Dedmon, who's in drop, locks eyes with him, takes another step in. Dedmon has to again stay frozen because Quickley's so deadly with that floater, and he can take the pull-up 3. And instead just a lob over the top to Mitchell Robinson. And it looks really easy, but you watch it a couple of times and you're like, oh, he's doing 5 or 6 things in a matter of 2 seconds that get you to that play. And then to your point, down the stretch against the Miami Heat. I mean, this is, we can't talk about Immanuel Quickley as a star yet because it has to be over a larger sample size. It has to be over more minutes. It has to be during more meaningful basketball, to your point. But this is what you want out of a quote-unquote star. Like, you're down by 17 on the road, to your point, to like the tough guy team in the NBA, and he rips off a personal 8-0 run to start the quarter. And then the Heat punch back, and the Knicks very easily could have folded. I think for most of the season, with different guys in the game, they would have folded. But instead, he just makes these 2 fantastic plays with the shot clock dwindling. And this is where you really get to see some improvisation. He catches the ball just inside half court. This is like with 3.5 seconds left. I think they were up by like 2 at this point. He somehow turns that into like a running floater just inside the foul line to beat the buzzer. Has another one, shot clock under 3 seconds, gets the ball from Obi. It's basically like a bailout situation. Like, typically he would take a step back 3 in that situation. Instead, has this burst going to the rim, lefty running banker, just a nuts shot, like something that, like, I don't know, like 12 guys on earth would hit that in that moment with any kind of consistency. Had the steal and like the up and under layup to really help seal it, to put the Knicks up by 8 with 1:39 to go. I can go into more of his stuff against the Pistons. Like, there was another play against the Pistons where he got a rebound and in one motion just basically like redirected it 60 feet up the court to Obi in stride for a dunk. Again, that's a high level point guard pass. It's not a quote unquote shooting guard pass. And it also emphasizes just how important his rebounding is, because that's the kind of play you get to make when your guard is getting that rebound. If your big is getting that rebound and shuffling it over to a guard, that's not going to happen. But anyway, Stacy, I'm throwing a ton at you. We're running way long on this first segment, so we'll continue talking about Immanuel Quickley in just a sec, but I want to take a quick break. All right, guys, it's that time. Let's talk about Built Bar. This is the time of year I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but it's not going to happen in 2022. I'm sticking with my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. They have yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. They're going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. That includes the puffs, 100% real chocolate. They're low calorie. They're high protein. You can replace your candy bars with them because they're better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. So go to Built.com and scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low cal, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. You can compare that to any candy bar. They'll usually have about 100 more calories and about, 7 times as much sugar. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious, and it'll be good for you. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, with that, we are back on Locked On Knicks. Stacy, I just rambled for 5 or 6 minutes. I'll throw it back to you. Let's keep going on Immanuel Quickley. What did you see from him, like, specifically in these 2 games that really wowed you? Because I'm with you. To me, this was almost another step forward, even given the qualifier that he's been playing great of late.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of stuff you talked about, right? The manipulation. There's also things that he's been doing. He pushes the pace more than any other guard. That's just been a fact. The few times Kemba looked good was when Kemba was pushing the pace. Alec Burks looked more functional. But this team is just a team that they don't have great half-court creators, and they thrive when they get into their sets quickly. No pun intended. And they don't have 16 seconds left on the shot clock. We made it what, 15 minutes without a Quickley punt? I think that's pretty good, right?
I give both of us a lot of credit.
So that's number one. That's been something he's been doing all season. What you really see now is he's leveraging his paint touches in a way that's the difference between this year and last year. Like, he can get to the paint, and once in a while he hits a floater, or he can get a foul call. But some of the foul calls are gimmicky. He's now drawing those fouls, but like, it's not the things where like it's just jacking up a shot and like pulling the guy's arm, or like, I don't want to slander Trae Young or anything, but it can feel gimmicky. You're seeing him claim.
But Stacy, real quick, to your point, like, I think people underrate how much the rule changes affected him to start this year, because that was such a big part of his offense.
Yeah. But the fouls he's drawing now, to me, field call is totally different. Like, he is claiming space, and he's like, I'm going to shoot this, and you can't avoid fouling me because I have claimed this space, right? You're not like, I'm not flopping, I'm not flailing around, but I'm claiming space that I can use. And if you get out of the way, I'm going to have a clean look. And that's why he hits a lot of those for and ones, right? I mean, he had one today, I think, against Detroit, where he did that, and he got the floater to go because of his body control and touch. And because that's just not that awkward of a position for him to be in. That's something Harden, by the way, doesn't get a lot of credit for. It's like, it's not just the fact that he's able to draw fouls, and some of it is kind of gimmicky stuff, but he also is able to hit shots from tough angles, so that like he turns a lot of those into and ones. And then the other thing is, the foul drawing is now more impactful. He slowly has the ability to, like, if you give me the layup, I'm going to take it. Maybe I'll get swatted. I'm not going to yam on dudes, but I will take that layup. He has a more diverse passing array. He can make quick decisions. And then and now you mix in the floater as kind of a complement to those things as opposed to the staple. And that's been the biggest evolution for him. And then, so that's without even mentioning the manipulation stuff. But I think that's part of it because, he can, because that there's so many different things he can do, he can use that to his advantage, and he's pushing all the right buttons. I think I had a GIF, or GIF, whatever you prefer, of someone saying "dance, puppet, dance," and that's exactly what he was doing to Eric Spoelstra's defense, right? A defense that has caused the Knicks a lot of problem, and he did it against a diverse range of schemes. When they went zone, he was using his eyes, he was finding shooters, or he was getting to the paint when it was open. When they were trapping, he was staying calm, using escape dribbles. Things that he didn't do consistently last year, especially against this Heat team. And then the last thing I'll say is kind of going back to the manipulation point. He is an active player. He's not like Tibbs talks about read and react, but what really makes a special player is where you can kind of force the defense to do what you want. I think there was a clip from the game where Jericho Sims had a roll to the basket, but the Heat had kind of narrowed that angle. So there was an easy pass open for three, But IQ's like, no, I want to hit Sims. So he froze the help defender, I believe it was Jimmy Butler, by looking there, looked Jericho open, ends up in a dunk, right? And that's the difference between, just a guy who makes the easy passes but isn't really injecting creation into your offense. That's the difference between, that's the difference between kind of a game manager point guard, and the creator. It's kind of, I mean, I think the analogy works for quarterbacks too, right? Some quarterbacks, if you give them the check down, they'll take it every time, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the special ones are the ones who are like, I have a tight window, and either I can just fit it in there with a crazy pass, or I can widen it just by holding you or making you have to worry about more things. And that's been the revelation with Quickley, is just because he can threaten the defense in so many ways, like literally in every other way besides the one thing that for most guards is the most important, which is rim pressure. He can do everything else at such a high level that it makes you wonder, like, even if he isn't finishing, at the rim 3, 4, 5 times a game, since he can be functional as a creator without it, maybe that's still a pathway to being a high level starting, above average starting point guard, or two guard, or whatever he is, but a creator, someone who can play that role on offense.
Yeah, and I think, and this is my final point, and then we can move on to Obi Toppin maybe. I think I'll give you credit for never wavering, because I think we had like a Twitter exchange about it at some point. Like, I was kind of at a point where I was like, this guy, like, it was kind of heartbreaking to watch, because this guy his free throws indicated it, clearly such a talented shooter, just could not hit a shot. And it's at one point, like, I thought the swagger that just so defines his game started to droop a little, and you could tell, like, he wasn't expecting it to go in. But maybe the right take on all that was, and I think this is where you were at the time, was the fact that he's doing all this other stuff at such a high level without the shot is indicative of the fact that when the shot comes around and just like everything gets that much easier, it's like getting like an oxygen tank, like it just, or leveling down, like everything opens up that much more. Like, his game was just going to explode. And I think that's what we've seen. And that's why it seems almost like disconcerting and almost hard to believe that it's real. It's because he already improved so much at these things, but now that the shot is really dropping, all those things become that much easier, and he can do them that much more consistently. But let's get into Obi a little bit, because I thought he was also great against the Heat. Obviously, the last game that he had before Julius Randle came back, but he had 13 points in the third quarter, and I mean, it's all the things that you continue to expect out of him, just running the floor hard, like getting early steals. Like, Evan Fournier hit him a couple of times on like really nice outlet passes, and he was finishing through traffic. He even had a pump fake 2-dribble pull-up jumper against the Heat that blew my mind a little bit, because we saw tiny bits of that in Summer League and maybe once or twice previously this season, but it's been so few and far between. And then, of course, the next game, Julius comes back. Obi he had some good moments against the Pistons, but it was, again, like, he lost, I think, a little bit of that rhythm, a little bit of that confidence. And I guess it's sort of the same story with him as always, because there was a play against the Pistons where the Knicks had this fantastic possession. It was like swing, 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 ended up with Obi wide open in the right corner. He didn't take the shot, and it resulted in a turnover. And like, against the Heat, there were a couple of times he did similar stuff, but he was able to turn into something else, like whether it was like a pump into a shot, or a pump into a drive, or a pump into the next pass. But eventually, like, that shot is going to have to drop, not at a great rate, but maybe just 33, 34%. And he's going to have to be willing to take it, I think, for him to be the guy and the reliable guy that we all want him to be. And maybe the bigger picture version of that is, if you want to justify trading Julius Randle this offseason and making Obi Toppin your starting power forward, I think it has to come with the confidence that that shot is going to fall.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because I don't think there's any real issues with his form. I don't know what he's shooting from free throw. In college, 9% 3-point shooter, but it wasn't on a very high volume. And yeah, so he's at 75%. Last year, he was at 73% from free throw.
Yeah,
I wasn't someone who bought him as like I think everyone's like, he's a 3-level scorer. I was like, I'm not quite sure I'm there. I thought he could be the kind of guy who could hit an open three, but not take like pull-ups and those kind of things, or movement shooting. But he's back up. He's at 25% this year. I think it's worth noting, right? When your minutes are so short, and you do kind of have sporadic minutes, and you're kind of have a short leash. This is not to hate on Tibbs. I do think Obi deserves a long leash, but it's not the point of this conversation isn't that. But if you're judging his shooting, I think that has to be taken into account, because last game he actually had a pretty wow moment where he got the ball in the corner, pump faked, and then like from like a full sprint, stopped on a dime, pull up from like maybe 16, 18 feet, and nothing. Like it's a pretty shot when he makes it in, right? He puts a lot of arc on it. He's not call fluid, but it is like the motion isn't. There's no real hitch. Like it's a little bit mechanical, but it's fine as a shot. That said, like, what does he have to shoot? It's a complicated thing. Number one, I think that he's a weird player on defense, because I think he's actually pretty good at rim protection. If you could just ask him to go up, he's very long. I think he's like a 7'2" wingspan. Obviously, he has the athleticism. He's a pretty smart player on defense, but you ask him to guard in space, particularly on pick and rolls, and then that's not great, right? So he's on defense. You'd like him to be a 4, but on offense, he's probably, you don't want him. He's not an ideal floor spacer, right? You'd like it. So I think I agree that you'd like him to get up to at least 33-35%, where defenses don't want to leave him wide open. To his credit, I think that people still like, he had one against the Heat where they did close out and he turned that into a drive. And because he's so quick, and he's so good at like just finishing in traffic and the body control and all of that, he can still attack. And I think like one interesting case is like, if you move as well without the ball and you can pass really well and screen and all of those things, how much does that mitigate when you're talking about spacing and creating for the offense? How much does that mitigate a lack of a jump shot if you use those guys creatively? I think that's the question worth asking. So the two main things are, how much, and I'll ask you also, how much do you think? So it's one, like, do you think that those things can mitigate? Because he does everything else at a high level. And there's so many things that don't show up in the box score. There's so many times in clips where you see the Knicks get like a wide open 3 in transition, or someone gets a free drive, and then you're like, oh yeah, the defense was worried about Obi because he like did 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and was just beat everyone down court, and they had to panic and they were scrambling, right? On offense in the half court, he moves very well without the ball. He's a smart passer. He's a quick decision maker. The Knicks, by the way, do lack, especially in the starting lineup, connective passers who just keep the ball moving, move without the ball, make quick decisions. That's something Quickley, Obi, Grimes, like all the second unit guys are much better at.
Deuce in particular has been good at that the last few games.
Exactly. That's why Deuce has been able to remain productive despite not getting, even he is a point guard by background.
Yeah.
So how much does that mitigate the spacing? I'll ask that to you. And then the other thing I'll ask is, how much do you think that because like Deuce was a 40% shooter in college from 3, excellent shooter in the G League. He's got a great pull up. We know his form is good. When he's gotten minutes, he's had some really good shooting performances, but even he has, I think he's shooting something in the 20s from 3. And a lot of that I think is because he gets attempts in like a 5-minute stretch, right? And he's coming right out. Do you think like that is a mitigating factor in all when judging Obi's shooting?
I want to answer both of those. I want to first take a second to talk about NBA Top Shot, but then we'll come back. We'll finish up on Obi Toppin. We'll talk Deuce McBride and get into all the other fantastic Knicks performances over these 2 wins next on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, it's that time once again. Let's talk about one of our favorite sponsors in NBA Top Shot. NBA Top Shot's the officially licensed NFT of the NBA. You can connect with a community of hundreds of thousands of NBA fans as a natural progression of fantasy sports, a way to upgrade your experience as an NBA fan. This is the future of what being an NBA fan looks like. It's part trading cards. Every moment on Top Shot originates in a pack. So unlike trading cards, these aren't still images on cardboard. They are officially licensed NFTs of the greatest moments from NBA history. Akin to the stock market for the NBA, every day millions of dollars worth of NFTs are traded back and forth between tens of thousands of NBA fans around the world. There's also a fantasy sports element in that every night you have the ability to capitalize in the markets if you're able to predict the top performers. And they also have it's also functionally an airline loyalty program for the NBA. There's nothing like that out there. I can tell you that much. Top Shot flew collectors out to Game 5 of the NBA Finals based on having Suns moments. They flew people out to the NBA draft based on having rookie moments. Those people got to have dinner with first-round picks that were drafted. They got to play basketball with Tyrese Halliburton, and someone you might know pretty well, Obi Toppin. I hear people ask all the time, why would I buy a highlight when I can watch it on YouTube for free? It's not just about watching a highlight. It's about having ownership stake in what's akin to a stock market for the NBA's greatest moments and highlights. So challenges are the best way to earn exclusive moment NFT rewards. Complete challenges to unlock moment NFTs. You can treat Top Shot like the best of daily fantasy sports. Top Shot's moments can get you access to events and can be used in fantasy minigames on a regular basis. NBA Top Shot is the future of being an NBA fan, so own officially licensed rare NFTs of the greatest moments from NBA history. Sign up today at lockedon.nbatopshot.com. That's lockedon.nbatopshot.com. And we also wanted to remind you guys that this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and literally in your pocket. So you save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more from the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Plus, Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every single customer. Save everything you could possibly need, from brake parts to tail lamps to motor oil and even new carpet. So go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked down in there. How did you hear about us box so they know that we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, we are back on Locked On Knicks with the fantastic Stacy Patton of both Pod Strickland and the Believe Knicks podcast, co-hosted with Matthew Miranda. So we were going to get into it a little bit on Obi and how much his off-ball movement mitigates his lack of shooting, and I think it's a fantastic point. It's something that I've been talking about all year, and you can just I think it almost stands out more in contrast to Randle, right? Who so often is just static and wants everything to be at his pace in his time. And there's no other word for it to me. Like, again, purely in a basketball sense, it feels selfish. And to me, like, Obi is the epitome of an unselfish basketball player. And I think you nailed it with how he runs in transition and how that opens up threes for other guys. A lot of times it's just him cutting off the ball, and you'll see this cascading effect of help defense that generates open looks for other people. And it's, again, if he cuts to the rim and he would have had an open dunk, but someone had to help off the corner, and then the ball gets kicked to the corner and that person hits an open three, to me, that's essentially the same thing as Obi Toppin hitting an open three. Of course, it's not exactly the same thing, because then on ensuing possessions, he might not get that same respect. But you can also argue he has to, because he's going to be able to keep making that cut, and you can't totally play off of him. And I love the way, like, him and IQ, it's almost like what Draymond and Steph do, right? Like when Draymond is in guard, he's saying, great, I'm going to go screen for the greatest shooter to ever walk this earth, and he's going to bomb open threes in your face. And we had a couple plays like that. I know there was one against the Heat in particular where IQ threw it into Obi. Obi half ducked towards the rim, drew like a soft double team, and IQ, who's getting, this was one thing we didn't talk about. Like, I think his off-ball stuff has gotten better and better and better. And he's so conscientious, again, to your point about like playing defenses like a puppet with how he moves off ball and what he does with his eyes. He just popped right out. Obi shuffled him the ball and he hit an open three. And when the Knicks have excelled over these last couple of games, sans Julius Randle, to me, it's about all the stuff, to your point, that just does not end up in the box score with Obi. But like the two-man game with him and Fournier, that again with Julius is so like monotone and predictable, and it works at times because Julius is really skilled and Fournier is just a fantastic shooter who can hit fadeaways from 23, 24 feet out with guys in his face. But then I see him and Obi, and they do those same sort of dances, and they're getting layups because that's what Obi's aspiring to do. And Stacy, when you bounce back on this, you can incorporate Julius into this point, because I thought it was interesting watching him in his return against the Pistons. And in my mind, like the thing I was looking for all game, I was like, all right, how much self-awareness is there with Julius Randle, right? In a season where maybe there hasn't been a ton of it. Like he just watched what Obi was doing the last 3-4 games. He sees the Knicks operating on such a high level like that. Wouldn't he want to come in and replicate it? And the point that I've been making all year is like, if Julius just played like Obi, he could do all the same stuff. Not obviously like the finishing on lobs, but a lot of the same stuff, and do it at a higher level and add in more creativity. Like he would be picture perfect for what the Knicks are trying to do. if he just cut out like the crappy like step back ISO jumpers that he has to take 6 or 7 times a game. And it was this really mixed bag from Julius, where there were a lot of like those aforementioned ISOs, and there were plays like where he was like spraying the ball out to shooters on the short roll, where I'm like, yeah, that's like, I mean, that's what I love about Obi, like when Obi gets going. But Julius, because he just has that extra bit of gravity, can do it at such a high level. And it's just this interesting contrast between the two. And I think so much of the difference between the two and their effectiveness, and it's the same like when you compare Deuce McBride to, like, not to take a shot at Alec Burks, who had an amazing game against the Pistons and won them the game with the steal, but there's such a mentality shift with the younger guys. And to me, to your point, that compensates for any lack of skill or talent relative to the guys that Tibbs has been going with all year.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think they all bring certain talent, which is there's just more athleticism and foot speed on the perimeter for those younger guys.
Yep.
Real quick on Alec Burks. So I think that I've been very critical of the decision to start Alec Burks at point guard. So let me reiterate, I think he's a very good player. I think it would actually be a shame if the Knicks, a lot of people are saying the front office needs to save Tibbs for himself by taking away his vets. It would actually be a shame if they had to dump him just to get rid of him, because he's a valuable player. He's a good off-ball player, and he's good at defending big wings. Who did he have if you looked at the first half, right, he struggled very much against Corey Joseph to keep him out of the paint. But when he was playing with Quickley took the ball handler. That allowed him, I think they played Hayes at the end, so he's a little bit bigger, but that allowed him to guard Cade. And partly because he's got a couple of tricks up his sleeve that obviously Cade's a rookie and is still adjusting to, but also because Cade doesn't really have that foot speed advantage of him. That's where Alec Burks can really use his tools, right? So I think that, yeah, I think I don't want to take, like, it sucks that we have to take shots at Burks when you're talking about the lineups, because he definitely is a positive player for this Knicks when he's used properly.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I'm going a bit on a tangent, but if you think about all of the tweets that are like, IQ is a nice guard off the bench, he's a combo guard, right? And then, but he can't defend point of attack players, or he's not a great defender at that level, or he can't get to the rim. If you replace Alec Burks, if you replace Immanuel Quickley's name with Alec Burks and all of those tweets, they actually make sense at that point, right? Because all of those things are what apply to him. And then it's like, let him be a good bench guard, like, don't have unreasonable expectations. I think that's what applies to Burks. Going back to Obi, though, yeah, I mean, it's tough. I've tried to lay off Randle because he's obviously caught a lot of heat. There were a couple of just atrocious possessions in the first half, especially. I think in the second half, he was a little bit better. I think Tibbs maybe went in on him in halftime. But I did see a little bit more of that self-awareness. And then, every time I started to think that he would get back cut by Marvin Bagley or something, right?
Yeah.
I think that one dunk was just, it's not the fact that he got dunked on. It's just at that point in the game to get caught ball watching as a veteran player, it's just inexcusable. And it's not an isolated incident. I think the play that was just most damning is, there was a play where I forget, he had a turnover or he got blocked.
Oh, yeah, where Cade blocked him. Yeah.
Yeah, Cade blocked him. The Pistons end up in transition. Quickley makes a hell of a play getting back.
That's what I thought of when you talked about his verticality. I was like, yeah, he just did it.
And then so Randle jogging back on defense, as he's wont to do, actually worked out, because now he has an open layup. Blew the layup, once again jogs back on defense, Pistons. And that was just like, come on, man, right? Like, you talk about a guy could have one good play and make 9 or 10 bad plays, right? That's what Tibbs said. It's like what we're seeing right here, right?
Yeah.
Now, to Randall's credit, he had a big step back three at the end. He made, his talent is without question. And I don't think, like, if you watch Obi the way he runs the floor, it's not just abnormal for this team or compared to Randle. He probably runs the floor harder than any other player in the NBA. Yeah. He looks like, I mean, I think Dallas Amico had a clip a couple of times where he's just like, he ran like full speed on offense. They missed the shot, runs all the way back. He just 3 or 4 times full speed, doesn't even get the ball. And it's almost like watching Forrest Gump, right? But yeah, it does. I mean, no one's asking Randle to do that. But if you don't jog back, you shouldn't be getting beat down the floor by Isaiah Stewart. Okay, you shouldn't. If it's one thing, it's if you just out athleted or whatever. But that's not what's happening. You like, don't jog back. And I think it's worth noting. Somebody put a picture up, right? It's like lots of coaches play their players heavy minutes, right? And it's like guys, the leaders in minutes played per game. And that list had a lot of the top players on teams. What problem was most of them were guards or wings who weigh about 40 pounds less than Randle at least. There was one other player who is like comparable size to Randle that was in that list. And I don't think that's an accurate comparison because that player is the second best player of all time and is a freak of nature who takes care of himself like that. And also LeBron's only played 54 games, right? So I think it comes back to, it's not about being minutes police, but you'll notice Jokic isn't on that list. You'll notice Embiid isn't on that list, even though those are clearly the best players in their teams. Why is that? Because at that level, it's tough to play hard for 36 minutes. And I think that is at least a little bit of a mitigating factor beyond just Julius's attitude. And, he shouldn't be getting 36 minutes a night at that size. If you get him down to 30, that opens up 18 for Obi. Obi's averaging like 16 minutes a game, but Randle has missed some time. There's a little bit of overlap, but you can easily get Obi 5 to 10 more minutes a game, and it would probably help Randle. He's not going to run the floor the same way. He'll probably have a couple of possessions that make you upset, but he's probably not going to jog back on defense as much. He's probably not going to have that same energy as well. So I think that's worth keeping in mind. The last thing I'll say is coming back on Obi. I think he's a valuable player. I think if he was in a featured role, you'd probably need to tailor your personnel a little bit around him. You'd probably want him next to a stretch five.
Yeah.
But he can. But he's played mostly with non-shooting centers, and his on-off numbers have consistently been great. So I don't know that how much that really hurts. But it's fair to say, does that mean he's a starting forward? I think the John Collins path is the most optimistic one, but Collins is a 40% shooter, and at this point, it's tough to, even if you think that his rhythm has been thrown off with the minutes jerking, it's tough to really make a strong case. But the other thing worth considering is, given where the Knicks are picking in the draft at 12, there are going to be a lot of these 3/4 type wings who aren't, like, if you think about guys like Terry Eason, Jeremy Sochan, who are not particularly convincing shooters but are great athletes in kind of the same mold as Obi. That makes it tough, right? Because if you have Randle, you have Obi, and now you have that other guy who you're going to want to prioritize, or even if it's a guy like Keegan Murray, who's a much better shooter than Obi, but also is probably a 4, that's where things start to get a little dicey for his future. But it'll be interesting to see him grow. And I think no matter what, I don't think you're ever going to have to question the guy's work ethic or the fact that he will get everything out of his own ability, whatever that is, going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this when we had Benji and Prez on, and we did this like series on like skill development. It's sort of the question with like Obi, like, is he worth dictating around to make him as effective as possible? But I think you've done a great job in this podcast outlining he doesn't necessarily have to make a huge jump as a shooter or in terms of the personnel around him to still have a positive impact, because he does all these like niche skills at levels that are rare, or like in the case of his running the floor, like maybe otherwise unseen in the NBA, and he has a lot of value that way. I think the offseason question is a great one, the draft part specifically, and we can only find out on that because it's a very big topic. All right, guys, we decided to actually break this up into a 2-parter because me and Stacy just kept talking, and all of a sudden looked at the clock and we were over an hour. So in part 2 of this podcast, we're going to go deep on the rookies, Miles McBride, Jericho Sims, and Quentin Grimes, both their performance these last 2 games, but also what to expect out of those guys in the future, and how what we've seen from them so far, while positive and a whole lot of fun, is only scratching the surface of what they can eventually be. But until next time, be good. Tune in for plenty more episodes this week. Remember to subscribe. Remember to like. Remember to comment. Remember to leave us 5 stars on iTunes. But until I talk to you next, be good. Peace out.